we're the Queen's Game Developers Club, and we're really lucky to have Chris Barrett, who I believe was the technical director on Nitronic Rush. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And he was writing code and putting together a lot of aspects of the game. I don't know how much he had on the trailer or the release itself, but hopefully he's going to tell us. He's a student at DigiPen, and I hope he can tell us a little bit more about what that means. But Chris, I just wanted to say thank you for speaking to us today.
No problem.
So to start off, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with software development? What led you to be a programmer?
My dad had worked a little bit with code, and one day I was about 10 or 11 years old, and he had a book on Visual Basic 6 on the shelf, so I just took that down and read it, and then just found that I really liked coding after that.
And you stayed with it your whole life?
Yeah. Can't recommend VB6 in general, but it was a fun starting point at least.
Right. And what about DigiPen? What led you into games and deciding that was the path that you wanted to take? Have you always written games as well?
I've always liked games. Even when I was first starting to do code, I was doing really awfully coded games. DigiPen in particular was one of only about 3 schools I was really looking at. And after going to NHTI, I did start at a local school near where I grew up. And one of my professors there just encouraged me to look at bigger schools, and DigiPen was one of the top ones I was interested in. Just got lucky enough to be accepted.
Huh. Can you talk a little bit more about what DigiPen actually is for people who aren't familiar with it? I know I only know it sort of in passing, but what is the school set up to do?
On the programmer side of things, well, actually, I guess to be more general at first, there's the programming degree, RTIS, which is real-time interactive simulation, which is generic enough to be games, medical and military training programs, anything like that, because we don't use any pre-built engines, except in senior year you're allowed to. There's the art degree that I know almost nothing about, and the design degrees, both a Bachelor in Science and Bachelor of Art. All of the degrees that they have are a ton of work. It's easily 70 to 80 hours a week of just work for pretty much every year.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty intense. And you said you're in Washington State?
Yep. Yeah, we're right near Microsoft, all them.
Okay. And how big is a typical class?
Earlier on, it can be as big as 40 or 50 students in some of the lecture classes, but as you get towards the later years, it can get as small as 4 or 5 students in a class. There's just a very high attrition rate.
Wow. Along with that, because we see the DigiPen logo on things like the Nitronic Rush trailer,
Mm-hmm.
how did the game come about? I guess we could just transition into that. What led you to start creating this game? Is it a school project, or is it part of your degree?
Yeah, so on the RTIS degree, which most of us on the team are in, freshman year you have the first semester, which is just doing a text-based game, but still from scratch and everything. Second semester is the only one you really use an engine for, which is Project Fund, DigiPen's own proprietary in-house thing that they use for teaching high school kids game making, everything. We use that the second year and do our first team-based game, or the second semester, sorry. Sophomore year, team-based 2D game for the entire year. Junior year, team-based 3D game for the entire year. And then senior year is kind of more what you want. So Nitronic Rush is our junior year project. We started on it the summer leading into junior year. And for getting started on the game itself, we basically all listed games that we all really enjoyed in the past. And San Francisco Rush 2049 was one of the most common ones amongst all of us.
Right. So everyone agreed as a group. This is what you're gonna head towards. How close was the end game to what you thought it was going to be early on?
The most basic pieces of a car that's fun to drive around is pretty close. Other than that, I don't know if any of us would have really known all the maneuvers the car could take. For example, the 4 side jets that rotate the car in the air or help you take tighter turns and such were a feature that came about from the physics programmer. He had a debug feature where he had a button that would just take a car that was upside down and apply a force in one end to kind of flip it back on its wheels. And that was left in as a button he just held instead of something that auto-righted the car. And even though it was completely broken and just did ridiculous force on the car, applied ridiculous force to the car, playtesters really enjoyed it. So we found a way to kind of work that into the game. And that was just an unexpected feature before that.
That's awesome. So I guess as an overview then, can you say what Nitronic Rush is as a game? Describe the game and what it's actually become. Is it possible to do that concisely, or?
I'm not sure. I think I can say that my favorite thing about it in terms of being a game is that even people who aren't very good at that type of game can still find something enjoyable in it. Other than that, it's a game about just having fun driving this car through a ridiculous environment.
Mm-hmm. I've heard, I guess the quote that I'm thinking of is the one from the Total Biscuit review that was on YouTube. And he said that even though he's terrible at the game, and he really is quite bad, he had so much fun playing it that it didn't really matter that he was bad. It was just so fun to launch that car around and do crazy stuff. But, yeah. So can you talk about the team? Were there 10 or 12 people on the team, something like that? It was
in the end, it was closer to 11 people. At the start, there was myself, the Nolan twins, who were doing physics and graphics. Blanking on names of people I've been working this side for years. Let's see.
That's fine. What about the effort? What percentage of the team was doing coding? What was doing art? Like, what was the end breakdown of people that were working?
It changed over time. At first, basically everyone was doing code, except the designer, who was just doing levels, helping with prototyping, playtesting, finding other games to reference that were similar in different ways from any console era, etc. Later on, we picked up a couple of sophomore artists that at first were just doing concept, and as they started learning 3D art, also got into doing some models for the game. Then a member of our sister team came on to do music, and another student from the school also came on to do music. So by the end, we had a more balanced team between who was doing code and who was doing other stuff.
And how did the team work as a whole? Was it a completely easy process, or?
Yeah, for the most part, everyone just got along pretty well. Pretty much just worked beside each other almost every day.
Awesome. Sounds pretty fun. If you guys have any questions as well, feel free to throw them up. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. Do you have a rough idea of how many downloads you've had so far?
Downloads are hard to say, partially because we decided to use a torrent when our website was dying from people trying to download the game, and the second mirror also died shortly after we put that up. Plus, like Chinese, Russian, Brazilian websites tend to host the Digipen downloads for free because there's no there's no license, there's no serial key, anything. I can say that I just a few minutes ago looked at the database where the game at least makes some minimal effort to connect to when it launches to check for updates, that kind of thing. And there's kind of a randomly generated, possibly unique user ID. I don't actually know the statistics on how many collisions are on that unique user ID, but based on all that, there's a very rough idea of around 51,000 unique players so far.
51,000, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And it's been out for 2 weeks now, right?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
1.5? Is it the 23rd? Yeah, so about 1.5 weeks. Wow, that's great. And the YouTube video, that trailer, has 170,000-ish views along those lines?
Yeah, it's higher than I last checked then.
Are you tracking you said it's a rough count, but are you tracking the downloads over time?
Downloads we can't really track, but I can have some rough idea of players.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's doing really well. Now, so with the game right now, it's a free download, and I think on your Twitter stream you guys were talking about the possibility of opening up to Steam. Is that something that you're looking at in the future, and is that something that you can pursue?
It's something that I think we'd all very much like, but I don't know what the status on it is. I don't know how difficult it will be. Traditionally, it's not something that's been done because it does cost money to distribute on Steam, and the games are strictly free.
Yeah. And do you own the copyright to Nitronic Rush?
Digipen does.
Okay. So that would be something in collaboration with them?
Yeah. It would require quite a bit of work from Digipen and only a little bit from us, I think.
Yeah.
unless we were to get into more integration with Steam. What was and on DigiPen owning the copyright, I know that's something that comes up a lot when talking about game schools, and some own the copyright, some don't. Um, I can certainly understand some of the dislike for that. Like, it would be nice if we actually owned the copyright, but at the same time, it does just make everything plain simple. So in the end, it's not really a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to see the 51,000 and think, oh, times 10, that'd be pretty good. Nice payday. Pay for the old tuition. But still, that's part of the charm of it. And most of the comments that seem to be coming up on the page are people who just can't believe this is a free product. I mean, people really seem to love it. Do you have a favorite positive review about the game? Is there one line that stood out that really made you sit back and say, wow, I can't believe someone said that about it?
The one that you mentioned from Total Biscuit, and there's another one, YouTube video, Nitronic Rush - I'm a plane, which is currently one of my favorites. Someone just discovered the wings button randomly while playing because they hadn't done the tutorial or something, and they were just flying throughout the city, going crazy, having fun.
That's awesome. I think the favorite quote that I saw, and I said this earlier before we started recording, but it was that Nitronic Rush looks like the way that games were supposed to look in the future a few decades ago. So in the Tron era, this is what all the games of the future were supposed to look like. They'll have that great Tron effect. So stylistically, it came out very nice.
Yeah, sure. I can. I was playing it, and one thing that came up, my husband wanted to know if we could play against each other. Is multiplayer something that you think you're going to integrate at some point?
So right now there is the Ghost upload and download. There's a friend group option in the options menu so that you can play against just specific people instead of the world in general. There's very minimal anti-cheat in the game, really not any at all. For actual real-time being able to run against someone else, if we ever add that, it certainly won't be to the point where you can bump cars into someone else, or at least I wouldn't expect it to be. At some point, if we find ourselves magically with a ton of time, I would love to do more Trackmania style where you're actively racing against someone else's ghost and you have, say, 5 minutes to get the best time, and in the meantime you're seeing their ghost of their best time. But I certainly can't say that that's something that will happen.
Thanks.
So I have another question about the game development process itself. You released the game itself, obviously, but you also talk about the Superdyne architecture. Can you discuss that and the way that you built the game and how the game is structured for people who are interested in the coding side?
Sure. Myself and the tech director on the sister team, Disco Tank, that made Solstice, worked on the underlying just base most C++ that both games would have in common. So we had basically 3 code repositories, one for the architecture and then one for each game. He and I each did roughly half of the architecture that each game uses. For example, he did a generic global variable system where you could just easily name variables and pull them back out. We've each done some of the serialization for supporting things like level editor, object archetypes. I ended up doing all the online communication stuff, but only some of that is in Superdyne. Overall, it's halved the work we had to do and got us to the point of having nicer features earlier in the game, faster iteration, that much sooner.
Right. And maybe elaborate in a little more detail on how Superdyne gives you that, because it's really nice to have the engine underlying it, but specifically, were there areas in general that Superdyne definitely saved you hours and hours of extra work? What kind of features other than you mentioned global variables, but what kind of stuff did it just really give you for free in both games by working on it in the one centralized source?
Well, actually, to start, one of the interesting things is that I guess it doesn't have physics or graphics like you would normally expect from Unreal, Unity, etc., because we had members of each team that specifically wanted to work on those areas. But the most critical areas of Superdyne that were useful were the component-based architecture, which is something that's been getting more popular lately. I believe Unity is component-based, but then things like Source and Unreal are still the old inheritance style. serialization is mentioned, object archetypes, which are sort of part of that, the basic control of defining a manager, components that work with it, system that gets called update at a certain period, because we are an update-based system. And other than that, nothing's coming immediately to mind. Except reflection and messages. That was also nice to have in there.
Right. Do you have plans to use the Superdyne architecture in other games as well that you work with?
Not directly. It's been used in a few other projects, including a physics and animation project by Nitronic's physics programmer. Personally, because I want to learn all the different styles of architecture, I'm only using very few pieces of it, and then otherwise rewriting each time just so I can get that much more practice. So I think there won't be that much more reuse of it.
Right. Is that also owned by DigiPen, the copyright to the Superdyne architecture?
Yeah, all work by anyone while at DigiPen is owned by them.
Right.
There's some discussion on whether or not we can still open source stuff like that, and at some point, if that is something we can do, I would like to do that. I can't say it's the most amazing code in the world or all that well commented, but I think it's at least useful for looking at.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that the amount of code in the world that is worth looking at as an aesthetic piece is pretty small as it is, so you can't beat yourself up too much over that one. So, what has the last 2 weeks been like for you? Has it been crazy since the launch?
Extremely. Mostly because of all the homework that we've all pushed off to do last-minute updates, like the online leaderboard system for Nitronic was written 6 days before the game launched.
Wow.
So there's just a ton of homework that we're all getting caught up on now.
Yeah. And otherwise, are you doing any media stuff, or is it mostly you're just busy with support and handling feedback from users?
We've had a couple of graphics bugs in particular. One of them has been figured out, so we're going to release an update to fix that soon. Another one hasn't yet, just because we don't have the hardware that other people have, so we can test and figure out why these things are happening. Thankfully, the producer and one of the 2 audio people have been handling most of the PR, because I know most of the rest of us on the team would be really bad at doing that. So yeah, it's been most of that. And my main entertainment lately has been just watching the random YouTube videos people upload. Those are always interesting.
And how many of those are there? I see them popping up from time to time, but have you already got dozens of them?
I'd guess somewhere around 75 to 100, but I haven't counted.
Great. Yeah.
What do you want to do after you're done with this game? Do you have any other future ideas, like anything kind of bouncing around the back of your head?
Let's see. I have 2 side projects afterward I want to do. One of them is to bring back Mage Warfare. Another one is more educational type games. Other than that, I know other people on the team have other ideas they want to work on. Haven't been thinking a whole lot about those as compared to homework lately, though.
What about after you're done school? Any future plans there?
Hopefully job.
But where? Are you going to a big studio, or are you going to do the indie route with Team Nitronic, or?
I'm hoping for some kind of balance between indie enough to have input on the actual game that's created and large enough to have stability where I know I have regular living expenses covered. Other than that, no exact plans right now.
Most people are in that situation anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Especially now, find any job and take it. So, anyone have a question? Yeah.
Are you finding through YouTube playthroughs that people are doing things that you might not have known was possible with the game? Like tricks or...
I know in particular on Olympian Iron Man, which is the producer's level, he was not really expecting people to just go up from the start line and boost straight up to the finish line, but instead to go around the entire 2-3 minute track. There are a couple of videos where people have figured out the infinite hover, where the rotational jets on the car are actually strong enough that if you flip the car over and use the rotational jets to kind of rock the car, you can float infinitely in any direction. It was something we knew about, but it was fun enough that we just didn't really want to take it out. And since it's not a commercial, super competitive online product, we didn't have to worry a whole lot about it.
Awesome. Anyone else? Do you have plans for for future content, for downloadable content for the game?
I can't guarantee that anything will be made. I know the physics programmer was playing around with another vehicle, some more levels or something that's likely to come. We were looking at the possibility of doing a reverse mode on levels, but there's no solid plans yet.
Right. Yeah. Just a quick question about that. So how long was the game in development from its original conception in the formation of the team until the release date on 11/11/11?
17 months. We started in the summer before junior year and pretty much worked on it all the time except for December and August breaks. Other than that, we were always at school and pretty much always working.
And do you anticipate another 17 months of maintenance now?
I have no guess on it, on maintenance. I think as long as there are enough people playing and there's stuff that seems worthwhile to add, that we may do it, but it just depends on our time. In particular, as amazing as network multiplayer would be, it's a massive amount of work. The engine was not written with that in mind.
Right. You have a question, Karen? Oh. So. Oh, thanks. Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, they mentioned.
Yeah, I kind of missed the first couple minutes, so I don't really know what's been asked. But so what gave you the idea for this game? It just
So when the team was first together and we were figuring out what kind of game we wanted to make, we all listed on our whiteboard just our favorite games. And San Francisco Rush 2049 was one of the most common, where it was actually the only one, I think, that every single one of us had listed.
nice.
So, what games are you playing now? Do you have time for games now, or what games do you like to
Haven't had much. We've typically, as a team, even both teams together, like during major breaks such as Thanksgiving or Christmas, we'll take a day leading into a night and pretty much play Minecraft in one server together. There's a video we recently uploaded where we all built the Nitronic car in Minecraft, just this massive structure.
I saw that video, actually. That was a big one.
Other than that, just a few minutes ago I was playing NetHack, just because it's a small game that's kind of interesting that I only just learned about. Very old game.
Is that because you worked on the text adventure games early on that you're now getting into NetHack and games like that?
More because I'm getting more into Linux, so I'm just curious what some of the older games on Linux were like, since I never had a chance to try them before.
Yeah.
Do you have any lessons for other people who want to make games? Or pointers, even?
I guess it depends in part on whether or not you're going to use your own engine. Using an engine like Unity or Unreal, I can't talk a whole lot about because I haven't really done that before, but it seems like a smarter route if you just want to try making a small game and get some kind of reward out of it early on. Or Flash is also good for prototyping. And if you're making your own engine, find other people to work with and be prepared for just a ton of work, but probably one of the best learning experiences for what actually goes into it and why certain features are more difficult than others to implement.
Right. Yeah.
How did you decide on the release date? Like, when did you know the game was done and ready to go?
So we submitted to the GDC competition for both professional and student, and the last deadline for it was, I think, November 1st or October 31st. And then with 11/11/11, shortly thereafter, it was about the right amount of time where we could wrap up the game after that deadline if we found any more problems with it. And it's just a cool date.
A lot of stuff was released on 11/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you didn't have to compete with Skyrim. It's free.
Although we did have a quote here that that Nitronic Rush was better than Skyrim, so you can put that on the homepage if you want. Better than Skyrim.
I think our graphics dev is eager to play Skyrim once the price comes down a bit.
Oh yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good. You have any questions? Well, we tried something last year with the club that we're going to do again, which is a game development challenge where we pick a time frame and we try to develop a game. Do you think we should try to write Nitronic Rush 2 or an inspired game by Nitronic Rush, or do you think we should? We have a month.
A month is a short time. Certainly, I think it's an easy game to make fun as long as you can get a car that controls nicely, and then after that, I think the rest of the game is fairly emergent from there. It's just fun to move through the world. Other than that, I guess I can't think of much.
Yeah, that sounds fair. That sounds fair. Well, in the meantime, we certainly have a hobby game we can play through whenever we get tired of working on stuff. We can just pull up our racing game and have a crash session with that. Yeah.
Did you have a level editor where some of your non-programmer tech guys could come in and design their own levels for the game too?
We do have a level editor. It's actually in the game that if you have it, you have the level editor. There's just a little setting in a text file you have to tweak. In our forum, we have instructions on how to, and I think a video on how to use it. Unfortunately, one of the most crucial pieces for using the level editor is using it carefully. It's a little crashy sometimes. It was meant more for dev use, so we just know what to do and what not to do to make it behave. But it is there and usable. We've actually had, I think, 2 custom user levels already uploaded.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Sounds great.
Is there a portal of some sort where people will upload their custom maps, or?
Right now, it's just through the forum or any other central place they can find. It's possible I could do an upload feature. It actually wouldn't be terribly difficult to write. The hardest part would be the user interface and making that make sense. So that's certainly a possible future addition.
That's right. Anything else? Well, Chris, thank you very much for taking the time. Like I say, when I first saw the trailer, I was really blown away. My jaw dropped, and especially to hear who you guys were. You know, you're not a professional game company. You're a bunch of people who are working on this in your hobby time. It's inspiring. It's really cool to see. So for those who have played it here in the club, everyone is sort of taken by it, and it sounds like people online are taken by it as well. So I think we really all wish you the best of luck. And we hope you get on Steam and sell 4 million copies and beat out Minecraft for the next big game, because it's really slick. So
Thanks very much.
yeah, well, and thanks for your time, and please send our best to the team, and we'll be following what you do.
Will do.
Great. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.